Usually when I'm doing this podcast, I tend to answer one question in detail. I do a really deep dive and I really examine issues that are part of the writer's life and part of the task of writing a book. Things like writing good characters, dealing with pacing, finding the motivation, finding the inciting incident and working with that. Things like that. But I thought that today I would really go back to basics because as a writing coach, I get the same questions over and over again from people who are considering the idea of maybe writing a book sometime, or from people who are just starting out and who are kind of toying with the idea and they're really not quite there yet, or they've been kind of starting in fits and starts and they're not quite sure whether they're doing it right. And so they come to me and they're like, you know what, I've got these crazy questions and they're probably stupid. And what I have to say is the only stupid question is the one that you didn't ask that kept you from moving forward. So I wanted to today talk about some of the most common questions I get about writing, especially writing fiction books, from writers just like you, from beginning writers, as a writing coach. And we're going to go through all of those today, ranging from, is writing a book really hard? What are the odds of success? How do I start? What makes a good character? What's the best way to structure a book, like writing a good plot? How do you come up with your ideas? What are your tips for world building? How do I handle writer's blocks? Should I outline? Should I write by the seat of my pants? How do I edit? Should I self-publish or pursue traditional publishing? And how do I market and promote my book? These are the top questions that I've gotten. And there are more questions, and I'll probably be touching on more questions, probably in this episode and maybe in a future episode. But I really thought that sometimes it's good to go back to basics and answer these things because chances are, even if you're not a total beginner with writing, you might be still thinking about these questions and thinking, you know what? Am I missing something? Do I have something that I didn't figure out when I started? Did I kind of skip a step as I started off? And so I think that it can be reassuring, even if you're not an absolute beginner, to hear what I have to say about some of the top questions that potential authors or even new authors ask. If you're a writer dreaming of becoming a successful author, join me, writing coach Karena Akhavein, on the How to Be an Author podcast, your weekly source for writing information, inspiration, and motivation. Hello, welcome to the How to Be an Author podcast. I am your host, writing coach Karena Akhavein, Ph.D. And as a Ph.D. in literature, I know this sounds funny, but I really like to simplify the whole tasks that go into writing and publishing a book. I have been doing this for a really long time and helping a lot of writers like you, and I've pretty much realized that it's both an art and a science. So whatever I can do to make the whole process easier for you, that is my job and my passion. I am a working author who keeps writing every day and coming across some of these obstacles and problems as well. And I use those to inform a lot of the teachings that I share with writers just like you. So if you're curious about what I do as a writing coach and how I can help you, go to my website, creativeandwritingcoach.com, or onlineCoursesForWriters.com. And you can find me there, or you can find me as writing coach on TikTok and Instagram. Those are all great ways to reach me, and you can see what a writing coach can do for you or see what one of my master classes can do for you, especially if you're on a budget. This is a great way to keep you on track, moving forward and publishing your book this year, because I hate to see you wasting time when writing a book is what you've always wanted to do. So let's jump right in to these very common questions that writers or new writers or wannabe writers ask writing coaches like me. Question number 1, is writing a book hard? What are the odds of success? Writing a book is really hard, but also is really not hard. It's really enjoyable. but also really challenging. You go through ups and downs. There are seasons when it comes to writing a book. There are times when you feel aligned, times when you feel like you're pushing against a very concrete writer's block, against a wall. But then there are times when you're in the zone and it's working really well. So when you ask me, is writing a book hard? Some stuff is hard and some stuff is not hard. And what is easy for you and hard for you really depends on what kind of writer you are and what your strengths and weaknesses are. And that's the beauty of it. We're all different. So what I find impossible, you might find that that's the least challenging part of the writing process. And then, vice versa. Now, what are the odds of success? That rests on so many things. When you look at the sheer numbers, they're not great. But when you look at the fact that most people who say that they want to write a book never actually write the book, finish the book, publish the book, promote the book, you start to see that the odds of success are actually higher than you thought. If you're developing a professional product and you're finishing it, you're delivering it, you're actually taking feedback and using that to improve, you keep learning as you go and you keep doing it and reiterating and promoting your work, you're already head and shoulders above most writers out there. So your odds of success are actually a lot higher. So if you're curious about this, you might want to see I've got some podcast episodes about this very question where I do a deep dive on that. Next question, how do I start writing a fiction book? Well, that depends on what kind of a writer you are. Now, maybe you're a writer who gets inspired by the world of your book. And then in that case, maybe you are doing research on a certain time period, a certain location, or some kind of a theoretical question, like maybe some kind of a scientific idea or theory, or maybe the life of a famous person that you're going to be inspired by. That might be the way you start. Or maybe you have an idea for a character and a situation, and you start writing that way. Maybe your way of starting out is that you need to take a course so that you are polishing your writing skills. Or maybe you want to start brainstorming. There's so many different ways to write a book, but really what you're going to need is, at the very least, you're going to need a storyline. And I call this the story spine. Your story spine is a little guideline that's basically about 7 parts, right? And it starts like this. It starts with once upon a time there was. This is your location where your book is starting and what the timeline is, what's happening before that, and now who it is that we're talking about, your main character. Every day, blank. This is your initial situation in your book. What's going on in your character's life that's kind of not acceptable, because a book is about a journey, right? Whether it's emotional or whether it's geographical, it's about something where your main character is going to need to grow and change. And to do that, they're going to have to change what their life is about. So what's starting out? Then until one day, blank. This is your inciting incident. This is the thing that changes everything. And I have full episodes about inciting incidents, and you're going to find them very, very useful to listen to. But the inciting incident is a major important part in your plot. Because of this, blank. This is the first plot point, first thing that has to happen that sets your character on their journey. Because of that, blank. This is another thing that, a book and a plot, they are all about logic. They're all about causality. So one thing happening or one thing being done by one character is going to create, a situation where things happen. So this is causality. And then until finally, and this is your climax of your book, right? Until finally something's going to happen where everything comes to a head. And ever since then, blank. This is the new situation, how your character has changed, how their world has changed. So this is your basic story spine. So for many people, starting to write a fiction book is thinking about this very basic building block of the story. And then from there, you start to structure a plot. And there's so many different ways to structure it. And people ask me, this is another question, do I outline or do I write by the seat of my pants? And I think you can do a little bit of both. I start with doing a little bit of free writing and brainstorming, and I'll free write until I can't anymore. And then I'll go back and I'll create my story spine. And then I'll use kind of a plot building beat sheet, such as Save the Cat, as an initial inspiration for what my plot should be, and I'll write a very simple outline. Now, that might not be right for you, but I think an outline really helps. And this, again, is where you're hiring a writing coach because you want their opinion. So if the outline is hurting you more than helping you, I'm going to tell you, let's find something else. But for most people, I find that an outline actually helps them to write better and faster. It helps you to write a plot that actually is engaging, moves forward, and where the, plotting and the pacing both work. So that's really important. What's the best way to structure a fiction book is in a way that moves forward inexorably, in a way that creates this story arc. Think about an arc. Think about a beginning, middle, and end that are satisfying. That's the best way to structure your book. And the best way to do it is not to overthink it. That can happen in the editing when I have you creating an outline from your rough draft. But that's a whole other story. I actually have an episode on that. You might want to listen to that. But also in my online courses, I explain to you how to do this because this is my secret sauce for creating a really good book. Now, next question. What makes a compelling protagonist? How do I develop realistic characters? Simple. You need a character who's not perfect. Your compelling protagonist is somebody who's relatable. There's somebody who has their strengths and weaknesses. There's somebody who's really specific, but that people can see themselves in a little bit. There's somebody who's had a backstory. There's somebody who has wishes, desires, goals. There's somebody for whom things that are going on are going to have some stakes. It's going to impact them. So when you're creating a character, the more nuance you can give, the more texture you can give to your character, the better. You don't want a character who's perfect. You don't want a character who's all good or all bad. You don't want a character who is the strongest or the best at anything. So remember that your character is going to have some stuff they're really good at and some stuff they suck at. And that's what makes them interesting. So developing realistic characters, I always say brainstorm and think about all these things and try to create a Bible for your character. Try to create their backstory. You don't need to give us all of it in the book, but I think it's really good for you to know that, which is what leads us into our next question, which is, what are some of the tips for world building in fiction? Now, I think that research is massive. I think that creating a location Bible is massive. Creating maps, creating kind of collages where you show what your world looks like. All of that is really, really important and cool, but I don't want you to go overboard and get researchitis where you're going to be researching your world for so long that you no longer have flexibility in your story and that you're not starting to write. So when you're doing a world, you need to create a world that is the perfect world to create the perfect obstacles for your character to prevent them from getting what they want very quickly, and also something that makes their life a little bit more difficult. When your world can be an extra character that's a bit of an antagonist, that is the ideal situation. Another ideal situation is where your world is limited. So an island that your characters can't get off of, a school that your characters can't leave, a friend group that is, a little bit claustrophobic. All of these things are great settings where your characters are forced to face everything that's going on. And I really, really like that. Now, next question. How do I handle writer's block? Well, that's the thing. You need to keep everything interesting. You need to realize that there's some days when you don't feel like writing. How can you get excited by the writing? So many different answers. Whether you're creating something that's multimedia, thinking of a playlist for your characters, or just making social media posts, all of those things are moving your writing career forward. So don't feel guilty if you're not putting pen to paper on a certain day. But also, you also have the Pomodoro method where you can put on a timer or where you can use dictation to create your writing for the day. So writer's block, it happens, but I find there's so many other blocks that are so much more serious than this inspiration block that most people call writer's block. You'll see. You'll have things that you really don't want to do, like promoting your book or like editing your book or like, asking people to leave you reviews. All of those things are blocks that actually impact your writing career just as much as the inspiration block. And if you're curious about the different kinds of writing blocks that plague writers and how to get over them, you might want to buy my book, Writer's Block is Not Why Writers Fail. It's absolutely something that is just one piece of the puzzle, and there is such a thing as resistance. And I do have a whole podcast episode on that you'll want to listen to if that's your story. But writer's block is something that exists in many different ways, but it's not as simple as you think. And sometimes it's more of an excuse than a reason that you're not writing. I don't want you to burn out by pushing through when you're not feeling it, but there are a million other things you can do. Now, other question, how do I revise and edit my manuscript effectively? Guess what? Hard for you to do that on your own. So I do provide you with self-editing checklists, but despite all of that, you're going to miss things. I miss things. I can't edit my own stuff all the time, but what I do is I will have beta readers, I will hire editors, but also you need to learn what your voice is and how to create that in the best way possible. And you don't want to let other people try to tell you what your book's supposed to be. So when you have an editor, just because they're a professional doesn't mean that you have to accept absolutely everything they say. When I'm editing my writer's work, I put it all in suggestion mode. I never change anything without giving them the opportunity to push back. Because if you believe strongly that I'm incorrect in what I said you should be changing something to, I really respect that, and I think your reader will as well. So how do you revise and edit? Carefully, frequently, but not obsessively is the right answer. Now, next big question. Should I self-publish or pursue traditional publishing? That is a huge question. And I have to say that it really depends on your genre. It depends on your goals. It depends on what you're willing to do to self-promote, which I'm going to roll this in. How do I market and promote my book effectively? Well, you do it starting day one of writing, and you keep doing it and you cannot stop. And it's so frustrating and so embarrassing, and it's not fun, but sometimes it is when it's kind of like problem solving. But I like to see what moves the needle, and it's a constant effort. So whether you are self-publishing or conventionally published, marketing and promoting your book is a huge part of your job. And it's really what's going to impact your sales more than anything else. You need to be a marketing machine. And if you don't feel like doing that, maybe you do want to pursue traditional publishing. You're still going to need to do it a little bit, by the way. But also, when you're pursuing traditional publishing, you need to realize that your book is a product and that this is not just about an art form. This is about what's going to sell. Nobody's going to publish your book out of the goodness of their heart or because you're cute or nice. It's because they're publishing it because they think they can make money on it. So you need to realize that. That's kind of a crucial thing. And also, you need to be realistic about, what am I capable of doing? Is my book marketable? Is my book something that's going to be interesting to a publishing house? And if I self-publish, am I capable of doing the work to push it through so that people actually discover it, find it? And also you need to know that, can you do that while writing the next book? Because the best marketing is writing the next book. Keep that in mind. Is writing a book easy? I'm going right back to the beginning, because after having talked about all these things, you're seeing all these moving parts. You're seeing all the many questions that people have. I've barely even touched the tip of the iceberg when it comes to all these questions, but these were the top ones. Is writing a book easy? It's not. Does it get easier? Maybe. But sometimes you start to realize that you didn't know how much you didn't know. So you're going to have ups and downs, and that's normal. And that's why you hire a writing coach. Or that's why you take a course that helps you to figure out the path so you don't get lost along the way. Because getting lost is obviously something that happens. You're stuck in the reeds. This is unknown territory, and it's intimidating. I get that. So if you're feeling intimidated, if you're feeling lost, if you want to talk to somebody about this whole book writing thing, you've come to the right place, baby. Reach out, creativeandwritingcoach.com or onlineCoursesForWriters.com or Writing Coach on Instagram and TikTok. You'll find me there, and I really welcome your questions. I always answer everyone's questions. You can always jump on a free 15-minute call with me to see what writing coaching can do for you. And I look forward to being with you next time on the How to Be an Author podcast. If you have any further questions, feel free to ask. Maybe I'll cover your question in an upcoming episode. If you have any pressing writing-related questions or would like to be featured on the How to Be an Author podcast, please feel free to reach out on my website, creativeandwritingcoach.com.